walked up to me and asked if I knew why people refer to me as the N-word. I wasn't from this space, how I spoke, how I pronounced things, my accent, everything was just a reminder that I was different. And this was the first time that I was aware of my blackness because I was different. For example, I remember writing this essay and the woman asking me, did someone write it for you? I said, give me something else to write it right now. And I wrote it down. So then there was another teacher that asked me how I learned how to speak English. And I had to remind her that, if you look at your history, you will know that, Zambia was a British colony. So obviously I learned to speak English. And the 8th of June, I got this letter saying, congratulations, you got the job. But I have never deleted that email. I've never deleted the email I sent to myself. It's still in my phone to this day.
Tell me, what would you do if you left everything familiar behind, moved to a new country, chasing opportunity, and then spend 9 months wondering if you had made the biggest mistake of your life? Today's guest is someone whose story is a powerful reminder that courage isn't the absence of fear. Musonda Malama is a TEDx speaker, entrepreneur, project management consultant, and founder of the Corporate Climb, where she helps women build meaningful careers, step into leadership, and advocate themselves with confidence. But before she was helping others thrive, Musonda was navigating some of the hardest season in her own life. After losing her father at a young age, she moved from Zambia to the UK and had to adapt to a completely different culture while grieving a profound loss. Years later, believing a new opportunity had awaited her, she made a bold decision to move to Qatar alone, a country she had never heard of. But things didn't go according to plan. As a result, the woman who has always been a go-getter was now questioning herself, questioning her decisions, and wondering if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. And then something happened. At one of her lowest points, she did something unexpected, and she got unexpected results. If you've ever questioned yourself, wondered whether you're on the right plan, really felt like giving up, stay with us until the end of this conversation.
When I was younger, my dad passed away, and my mom then had idea that we needed a change of scenery, so relocated my family, my sisters and I, to the UK to start fresh. So the biggest culture shock for me was stepping out of the airport in Heathrow and walking out into the cold that I'd never experienced before. I'm from Zambia, and sunny, beautiful weather. To walk into that freezing cold in Heathrow Airport was wake-up call. But then also we moved to a really small town called Camborne in Cornwall, and my sister and I were the only black kids in the school. So for the first time I realized I was the other, I was the minority, I was the only one. Having been in Zambia, I did have friends who were white, I did have friends who came to my school who were white, but the majority of us were all black. And this was the first time that I was aware of my blackness because I was different, and adapting to the culture, it was a lot of adaptation. And then, first of all, you're grieving your father. You've not even come to terms with the loss of your dad. And the next thing, you're in a new country. You're trying to understand how they speak. I spoke English because Zambia is a British colony, but I still struggled to understand the accents when we first moved here. People spoke, what are they saying? We can't figure out what they're saying. There was also discrimination in trying to almost put me back a grade. I remember because they didn't think that from being from Africa I would be intelligent enough, or I don't know whether that was their reasoning, but there was a reason. So they wanted to put me back a grade. And I remember my mum going into the school and just saying, to the head teacher, because my mum was definitely not that. She said to the head teacher, if you were moving to another school and then someone said, Miss, I'm not going to say her name, Miss, someone said to you, being a head teacher, you're going to be, you're going to be the cook. Does that work for you? And she was looking at my mum confused. But yeah, so that was the first point where I had to deal with a new environment, new change. The second part was when I relocated to Qatar by myself, and I was working a job that was quite stressful, and I made a decision to leave that job. And in my head, I thought I'd find a job really quickly, but that job, finding the next job, took 9 months. That was the most longest 9 months of my life. It was the most transformational, but it was also the biggest struggle I'd been through, because all the struggles up to that point that I'd experienced in my life had been coupled with family, supported by family. There was other family involved in it, but this was the first time that it was a struggle where it was just me dealing with it. On top of that, I lost my very best friends, Nina, in the same year. So my friend Nina passed away, and then I was dealing with the loss of a job and trying to apply. At that point, I'm sure I was recounting this story with my sister recently. I'm sure at that point I applied for over 500 jobs, and it was just a no after no after no. And that was the first time that I experienced dealing with things by myself, as I say, because every struggle that I dealt with previously, I'd always have my sisters with me, I'd always have my mom with me, I'd have my family, extended family with me. But that was the first time. But that was also the first time I decided that I was not going to allow life's experiences or life's situation to dictate where I end up. That was a transformation that actually put me where I am today, that period.
Wow. Oh, interesting. Really interesting to be in a country that you don't know anybody. Did you know anybody in Qatar when you moved there?
I didn't know anyone in Qatar when I moved there. I did not know a single person. I didn't even know where Qatar was on the map when I first moved there. I'd applied for jobs in Dubai because I'd been spending some time living in Indonesia before that, and I wanted to go back to live in the Middle East. I wanted to be in a sunny climate. And so I started applying for jobs in Dubai. So when I landed that job in Qatar, I didn't know that Qatar was a different country to Dubai. I'd never even heard of it, to be honest. It was 2012, coming into 2013. So it was a completely new country, new environment. I didn't have friends when I first moved there. I did build a community of friends, and that has helped me to deal with that period. But that 9 months time was purely me and one of my friends that I'd made that supported me during that time, and a couple of friends, actually not one, that supported me during that time. But no, I didn't know anyone when I first moved.
You didn't know anyone. Wow, that was brave. That was brave. Wow. So during that time when you were going through this season, I mean, from losing your dad, coming to the UK, climate shock, you know, when you come to the UK, everything is just a shock to the system because it's so different from your culture. You mentioned that that's the time that I really realized that I was Black. I mean, coming from Africa, you don't even think that you're Black. You just see yourself as a human being. But when you have to go into another country, that's when you are reminded.
Yeah, you're reminded by everything, you know. Even I'll just go back to even how I used to drink my tea. I remember putting 4 teaspoons of sugar in my tea, and my friends started laughing because they'd never seen that before. In Zambia, that was very normal for us, you know. We put 4 teaspoons of sugar in our tea, but you know, there was small nuances that were a constant reminder that I wasn't from this space. You know, how I spoke, how I pronounced things, my accent, everything was just a reminder that I was different. And I actually, interesting enough, I like being different, you know, I liked it. But at the time, it was almost like, oh, what can I do to fit in? You know, I don't want to be the old one. But what do you do? I'm not going to change the skin color that I was born with. I'm not changing how I speak because that's who I was. It was a big challenge. But again, like I said, I had my sisters and I had my mom with me. So that was a more manageable experience than the one in Qatar where it was just me. Yeah.
And how old were you when you came to the UK at that time?
I was just going into year 9, 13 going 14.
So 13, 14. Right. So in school, in terms of the students, did you face any?
No, I didn't have any discrimination whatsoever, in all fairness, with the schools. The kids were good. I did have one incident, though, where one little boy walked up to me and asked if I knew why people refer to me as the N-word. But obviously, none of them referred to me to my face, but must have been saying it behind me, behind my back, because this little boy was like, why do you think people say that about you? And I was like, no one says it to my face. And the good thing about people saying things about you behind your back, you don't hear it. So you don't hear it. You don't have to deal with it, right?
Yeah. Definitely. But at least, I mean, on all fairness, at least you didn't have to go through a lot of things in terms of being in school. Whatever they were saying it behind your back and not in front of
Yeah,
you.
I think the more impact was things like I said, I'm a brilliant student. I was always a bright student. To put me in the bottom set of things, but I always spoke up for myself. So I remember going up to the maths teacher saying, "This maths that you're teaching me, I did when I was 7. I cannot sit in this class. This maths that you're teaching me." And then they had no choice but to move me up to the top set. English, for example, I remember writing this essay and the woman asking me, "Did someone write it for you?" I said, "Give me something else to write it right now." And I wrote it down. So there were some nuances there where I think they had different expectations. And then there was another teacher that asked me how I learned how to speak English. And I had to remind her that, if you look at your history, you will know that, Zambia was a British colony. So obviously I learned to speak English because I was raised in a country that was colonized by your people.
By the British.
Yeah, so there were little nuances like that. But when it comes to the kids, in all honesty, I don't think I felt any differently.
Any discrimination or anything?
I knew the difference because I knew that I was different and I was highlighted that I was in a different space, but I didn't get any bullying or any abuse from the kids. I think it was more the system expecting something from a young child. They wouldn't question. If I just moved, say, from London to Cornwall, would they have been challenging my essays and saying, "Did you write this yourself?" Would they have been challenging all the stuff that I was doing, trying to put me in bottom sets when actually I was probably the best student that you had in the school? That kind of thing was more the discrimination than the individuals coming to me.
Individuals.
Yeah.
So it's more like a bias within the system, a bias which is not really obvious, but it's embedded in the system. And I like that you really went over the expectations. I'm sure they were expecting you to do far less than what you did, but you exceeded what they thought would come out of you. And that was really amazing, really, really amazing.
Yeah, and I think my mother, because credit to my mom, because like I said, when they tried to put me back because of my age and based on the age, it's like, because she was born in this month, she has to be. My mom was like, no chance, I'm not having that for my daughter. And because my mom was able to show me, I don't know if she was brave in that moment or she was just doing it to make sure that we didn't feel the need to
intimidated.
Yeah, the need to back down. If you see your mother showing up for you, give you the courage to show up for yourself. And that's why I was able to stand up even in the classes and say, well, if you think I didn't write this essay, then give me another one. I'll write it now, I think it's all credit to my mom because she made it seem like no one could mess with us and she will allow it. She will walk into those schools. And when I think about it, bless her heart, she was an African woman, and in this tiny little town full of white people, and then challenging them, saying, you're not going to discriminate against my kids. Not in those so many words, but just giving an example. Miss, if you move to another school and they go and put you in a lower thing, would you accept it? So why are you trying to do that to my kids? And I get it. It's the system set you a certain age. You should be in this class. If you're born in this month, you should be in this class. But my mom said, no, she's already done this year. So she's going to be in the year that she needs to be in based on the studies that she's done in Zambia.
Wow. And to be honest, credit to your mom. She's such an inspiration, considering that she had just come into the country. She didn't sound like someone was intimidated by nobody or any system,
No, do you know what? When I go for things in life, it's because of that woman. Honestly, it's because of my mother. And now I think I see some fears in her and some resistance in her, some hesitations now. Only now I see it. When I was younger, she never allowed us to see when she would hesitate because she would just go for it. So in my head, I always had this version of my mom that just went for things. And so when I started going for things and she'd be like, oh, are you sure about this? Like when I took a job in Indonesia and went in within 2 weeks without doing my research, she was panicking and worried. And I'm like, but you've been doing these things. So I learned from you. But obviously it's different when she does it because she had us to look up, behind her and she had to do to do, whereas when I'm doing it, she's looking at it like you don't have to do that,
Amazing. So let's go back to Qatar. So during that time, the 9 months, and I'm sure, obviously not working comes with a lot of challenges and a lot of things. What was happening for you internally, as in emotionally, mentally, spiritually? what was really happening with you during that time of waiting, that waiting period. How was that like? If you can just paint a picture for us.
So first it starts with, well, I've always had a job. I always get jobs. I always go for interviews and I land the jobs. I'll be fine.
Yeah.
That's the first month. The second month, I've got savings. It's fine. The third month, the savings start to dwindle and now your self-doubt starts to come in. Maybe you've just been lucky up until this point. Maybe things were just working out all this time because, it was like your luck's run out now. By month 4, month 5, your money's running out now. And I'm thinking, well, if I go back to the UK, the amount of time it's going to take me to save up how much I saved up, and how much I've spent and how much I could save up being here, you're conflicted. You're trying to use logic, but also you're trying to think, have I failed? Am I a failure? And, I had to ring my mum one time and say, I've run out of money. And she sent me a credit card to use for that period. One of my friends, I remember we reached the point, we would go for a walk every evening and go to KFC, we'll buy a chicken wrap. Probably why I'm vegetarian now, because I just cannot eat anymore.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, buy a chicken wrap. And she would be like, please don't leave, just stay, just stay, you're going to find something. And my friends would try and encourage me, but the self-doubt, you go for an interview and you feel like you've done well. And the first time you come back home, you're like, yeah, you know what, that went really well. And then the almosts, for example, there were so many almosts that kept, I think that's why I left that long. There were so many almosts, like, this one job, for example, made me an offer, good package. At that point, I'd packed my bags to move back to the UK. And I even came back and they rang me while I was in England and said, we've got this job offer, come back. So I went back and I got there, and there's a system in Qatar where they're only allowed to give a certain quota of visas to certain nationality. And they didn't have British women visas. So basically I went back and then they were like, actually, we can't hire you because we don't have any more quota for British visas. So then I was back to square one, and now I've just come back and I've taken this apartment, and I had to take a loan from one of my friends. Precious, I had to take a loan from one of my friends who helped me out, and then I was able to pay them back after I got a job. But that period was a fusion of emotions. From first, it was like pop, doubt, questioning your skills. Have I just been lucky? This has just been a lucky ride. And then it was, just be humble. Maybe you're aiming too high. Try and aim lower. Try and go for something else, And then it was, but the turning point, and this is a story that I absolutely love, because the turning point was this. 9 months in, all of this, mind you, I'm crashed. At this point, I get up, send CV applications, and then I just go out to bed and watch the Wendy Williams show, just to give me something to laugh about. And this one day I was on YouTube and I came across a book called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. And I listened to the whole book, and it talked about your mindset and how the things that we think and what we dwell on are actually what we end up manifesting or end up happening in our lives. And at that point, I realized, because I've been in such a funk for such a long time, I had conditioned myself to expect negatively. So even when I was going to the interviews, I was so crushed and downbitten that I wasn't performing at my best. That girl that had been like, I can do whatever, I can jump on a plane and move to Indonesia in 2 weeks, I can go and get a job in Qatar, and and that girl was not there anymore, because I'd allowed my circumstances to dictate who I was. So now I forgot who I was before the job. Yeah, I'd made that lack of having a job my identity, had made my brokenness my identity. I'm reading that book and listening to that book, I was just like, okay. I finished it and I sent myself I went to pick up my phone and I wrote myself an email. It was an email to myself, and it simply said, congratulations, you've got a job. That was on the 4th of June 2015. Now, before that, I'd interviewed for another job, for this job. I'd interviewed for several jobs by this point, by the way. I wasn't hearing back. So I interviewed for this job, and I got an email on the 8th of June. Hi, Musonda, your job offer. But mind you, I have been waiting for 9 months for this job. I wrote this email on the 4th of June. And the 8th of June, I got this letter saying, congratulations, you got the job. But When I clicked attached, because it was an email and then there was an attachment of a contract that I had to sign. When I clicked the attachment, that letter was typed up and signed by the CEO of the company on the 4th of June. The very day that I was laying in my bed deciding that I am not going to accept my current situation anymore, someone in an office was typing up the letter with my name on it.
You are giving me goosebumps. Like, seriously.
No lie.
Whoa.
I have never deleted that email. I've never deleted the email I sent to myself. It's still in my phone to this day.
Wow. Was that faith?
I think it was faith coupled with action. We pray for things, but I was praying for things, but I was also spending my day relieving the fact that I didn't have a job, telling anyone who would listen how stressed out I was that I didn't have a job, telling, going on and on and on about how I did not have a job and I was so skint. I haven't got any money. I'm running, I've got no money. I'm taking loans from my friend. I have no money. My kids are all used up. My savings are gone. So I was constantly dwelling on what I didn't have instead of focusing on what I was trying to get. Only when I wrote that email and shifted my mind to being in the position I wanted to be, did that letter come. Could it be a coincidence? I don't know. But for me, that was the actual. And when I went to pick up my ID for that job, I filmed it. I was sitting I got in the lift and I filmed myself. And in the lift, I said, "Will never be in this position ever again." And that was 2015. And I can tell you this to this day, I have never been that skint and I've never been in a position where I do not have money in my account after that day.
Woo. Speak of inspiration.
Yeah, and I think that's why I say, as much as my father's death was transformational, I had my family with me. That period, I needed to learn for myself. And I think God needed to humble me a little bit as well, if I'm honest. Because up until this point, life had just worked out for me. I had gone for things and it worked out. I had this. Life had just worked out. And I started to believe in my own source. When you start to believe that you're...
in yourself,
Yeah. And I think God needed to humble me, almost bring me back to understanding that I am not the jobs, I am not the money in my account. It is who I am when everything else is stripped out, which is where that true me was revealed in that moment.
I love that. I am who I am when everything has been stripped out. That's when you got to know who Musonda was, when everything was stripped out. And that helped you to go back to the source. And that was the Most High.
Yeah. And also just to go back to believing in who I was before, before I had the job, before I had the opportunity, before I proved myself, before your gifts and talents and show up for you. Who were you before that? And sometimes you have to go through that. You get to your lowest of points. What's the saying? The setback is a setup for a comeback, right? But if your journey has always been up, I've had some downs, but never down to that level that I had during that time. Honestly, to eat KFC every day. I know that might sound great, to some people that love KFC. It was chicken wraps. Me and my friend Rouge used to go for our walks. We were in good shape because we walked a lot, talking about how I didn't have a job. Again, keeping it burning, I didn't have. As opposed to where I was trying to get to while we ate our KFC chicken wrap. And so we affirmed a lot. I affirmed a lot what I didn't have in that moment, which was actually holding me back. Instead of me focusing on what I was trying to get to, I was focused on what was lacking. And because I kept insisting and going on about that period, it almost kept me there because my brain's thinking, we must like it here because that's what we talk about, right? We don't talk about things that we don't like. We don't talk about the things that we don't like. So whatever it is that you're spending most of your time discussing and confirming and consistently going on about, don't be surprised if it comes back. I always say that people talk about manifestation and we talk about manifestation as if it's only in the positive, but sometimes it's manifestation is you manifest what you focus on. So if your focus is on what you do not have, you're manifesting the lack of having. Is that even a sentence? Manifesting what you don't have. You keep affirming that you don't have something, and it keeps happening because that's what you keep insisting on not having. And Am I saying that your life changes the minute you start saying, I have, I have, I have? That's not what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I needed that mindset shift to go from I do not have a job to I do have a job. And writing that email was the action that needed to match my faith that I believed that I was going to get a job.
Talk of
Faith
faith in action.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing. There's something that Musonda has just said, which I want the viewers, that person that is watching this conversation, to really make note of. And one of the things she said is your setback is your biggest comeback. So in short, whatever you're going through, it might set you back a bit, but you need to look at the bigger picture and that this is your comeback. And again, another thing that she said, which I made note of, is your brain might think that you like where you are because you keep talking about it. So if you can just make note of what she said, be careful of the things that you keep talking about because your brain is watching and listening, and your brain will think that you are happy where you are. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Musonda. If I may just ask you, Musonda, what made you write that letter? What was the turning point? How on earth did you manage to pull yourself out of that box that you were in? Wake up and say something has to change.
Yeah, it was the book, that exact book. And reading the book, it was basically saying whatever you want, you have to almost expect it. You know, you have to start expecting what you want, because whatever your mind starts to believe, it will achieve. So it was that book. I don't know what made me do it. I think it was just, I was just trying something different. Up until this point, I had been ringing my mom, ringing my sisters, ringing my cousins, ringing my friends, and ringing everyone to say, oh, still no job, still no job. I just needed to try something different. And and to be honest, I didn't even connect the letter with the email until I was sharing the story with someone, you know, after I got my job, and I was sharing the story with someone and said, you know what, I finally got a job. Because everyone who knew me knew at the time I didn't have a job. That's how much I used to go on about it. And then I went to show them the email that I'd sent to myself and the offer letter. Only then did I clock that they arrived on this, they were written on the same day. So if I wasn't sharing the good news, I probably wouldn't have even noticed that I did it. But it's because I went to share the good news. You know, I wanted to give the same level of good news that I'd given the bad news, because everyone would listen. So it was during that moment. But yeah, I think I was just trying something that I hadn't tried before. I tried sharing, I tried crying about it, I tried giving up, I tried considering applying for lesser jobs. I tried everything. I hadn't tried believing that I would just get the job. And you know, that job ended up opening so many doors for me. And it's the reason that I do what I do even to this day.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Faith and works manifested everything, because you had the faith and you had the works, and you are a living testimony today. Previously, you mentioned that you were now seeing yourself as that broken girl. You are no longer feeling like the same Musonda, the same go-getter. If I want this, I get it. If I go after this, I get it. You are now somebody else. So during that time, before you read the book and your mindset was not where it used to be, did you ever get to a point whereby you felt like, you know what, I'm giving up. Let me just go back to the UK. This whole thing is not working.
Every day.
Did you ever feel like giving up?
Yes, a lot of times, multiple times. And I think what happens when you're going through a phase where life is not working out, or you expected it to work out, there is frustration, there's anger, there's shame, there is embarrassment. There's a lot of things that are going on, you know. I was a gifted child at school. I wasn't used to failing. I always succeeded in everything I tried. So for me, that was, I felt like a complete failure in that moment. I felt like I failed myself. I'd failed my family who believed in me for moving out there. I felt like I failed. And I think that was the biggest thing, because I then started to identify with that failure. And so, like I'm saying, when I go to the interviews, I wouldn't have the same level of confidence that I used to have beforehand. I must have reeked of desperation, because at this point, I just need a job. I've got bills to pay. my friends, my friends were stepping in to give me some reassurance. Two of my friends, Precious and Rude, paid my rent for 6 months. These two between them paid my rent for 6 months because they believed in me in that moment more than I believed in myself. And sometimes you'll be in those moments where you've got absolutely nothing left. Your self-belief is not there. Your motivation is not there. It's gone. And having the right people around you, the people who keep speaking life into you when you can no longer have you don't have any more life to speak in yourself. The people that keep a faith on your behalf and keep holding you up when you just want to crumble on your ground is really, really, really useful. And I try to be that person to other people because I've had people be that person to me.
Wow. And it's really good to know that you had people help you or support you during that journey. Because most people know when you're going through something, when life is not really where it used to be for yourself, people tend to shy away and only come back when things are okay. So it's good to know that you, other than just your family, you had your friends holding you back, supporting you. So this whole... Go on.
I was going to say, in this world now where everyone is so focused on self and is self me, self that, it's nice to have people that advocate for you because we all go through things, and you never know the moments that you might go through that might break you. And like I said, if it wasn't for the friends that I had, the people that stepped in, whether it was financially, whether it's just words of encouragement, whether it's just to keep checking on me, whether it's just to let's go out and do something to keep me motivated, I probably would have moved back a long time ago, and that this story would have ended completely differently.
That is so true. It would have ended differently. So true. Having your friends around and having to also start believing in yourself really changed your story. So looking back now at all these things that you've had to face, the things you had to fight, to struggle through, and you finally come out on the other side, what did this season teach you about yourself and about life in general? What did you learn from all these things that you've had to face and go through in life?
I think the biggest lesson was that I was strong. That was the first time I realized I was not just physically, but mentally resilient. I knew I was resilient and I knew I was strong, but I'd never been at a point that low. And the fact that I didn't resort to anything immoral or resort to, just lose as much as I lost the confidence in myself, I was still applying for jobs. I was still putting myself out there. I didn't stop. So I think the biggest lesson was that regardless of what storm I'm going through, I just need to keep going and I just need to have faith in myself and my abilities, but also keeping the right people around you, people who speak life into you, who support you and are not just there when it's a good time. We have so many good people that are there when things are going well, and then when things stop going well, they disappear. It's keeping the right people around you so that if hopefully we don't have to, but life happens, we go through things. When you're going through that moment, there is someone that can hold your hand and support you through that.
Yeah, indeed, life happens and it happens to everyone. It's unpredictable. No one knows the time, the place where things will happen, but things do definitely happen. And at that time, did you ever lose any friends or companions because of where you were at that time, because of the season that you were going through? Were there some people who kept their distance from you, who you were expecting, without going into detail or anything like that? People that you expected to be there for you, but they kept a distance.
I think I saw people's true colors, up until that point. I was earning big money from the time I was straight out of university. So I was helping a lot of people. I was supporting a lot of people, but I noticed people's true colors. What I mean by that is there's some people who would show up with words of encouragement, but at no point ask, how are you surviving? How are you doing financially? When actually, when I was in a better financial position, I've been looking out for you. I had people that were not making a lot and they would still send you I've just sent you £20 for this. So I just ordered this for you online, or I did this, little gestures showed me who people really were. And I did make a list. this sounds really petty, but I did make a list of anyone who showed up for me during that moment. And I knew that I'm going to show up for you the same way that you've shown up for me. Not to keep a grudge, but just so that I never forget the people that showed up for me in that moment. So there were some people that showed their true colors. I wouldn't say anyone that I cared about greatly was made it difficult for me to, like there's no one in that moment that I can say, I cannot believe you did that to me. You're no longer in my life. Most of the people that I cared for did show up for me very positively. There are some people who showed me their true colors, and it made me so much wiser, because after that moment, I stopped sort of feeling guilty about my achievement and then just giving away as much as I used to give away before that moment. I think that was a pivot into going from, I'm going to share everything I have because I think that everyone needs to be helped, to I will be very smart about how I share my blessings now, because when I was in that moment, there's only a few people that showed up for me. So those are the few people that will continue to share my blessing after I come over to the other side.
In short, we can say that you grew in wisdom.
I grew in wisdom and stature, yes.
You knew now that life is not about the people that you help are not always the people that will show up. And I don't know why it works like that.
I know. And I think I suffered a lot from winner's guilt when I first moved to Indonesia, when I was making the big girl money and I was helping this person I was sending money to, who wasn't getting money from me at that time, and then when I was in that moment, and obviously you can't ring people and be like, by the way, do you remember when I used to help you? I wish we could, but we don't tend to, right? So you just make a mental note and think, right, okay, so you benefited a lot from me when I was in that position. And I don't have to ask you, like, I'm someone who's been so self-sufficient my entire life. It's difficult for me even to ring my mother. That was like the hardest part, to ring her and say, I'm skint, I've got no money. Can I use your credit card to live off until I get back or whatever? It was really hard. Even the friends that helped me, there were people that were just like, they knew me. They knew how strong I was. They knew that I'm not going to ask. And they would just be like, you know what? I know you're struggling. Let me give you this money. Is stay in that position, and then when the opportunity comes, now you're not ready, right? Now you have to start getting ready for that opportunity that you've been waiting for. One of the things that I always say to my mentees is this: if you were in prison and they blocked you up for 8 months, or they blocked you up for 8 years, or they blocked you up for life, how you show up is completely different for each of these sentences that you've been given. So if you're in prison for 8 months, I'm only here for 8 months. You're preparing for your life outside prison. You're getting ready. You're living your life that you're going to come out and you're going to be on the other side of the prison. If you were 8 years, you might be studying, you might be doing something, but you're preparing yourself to be on the other side. But if you're locked up for life, you don't have anything to prepare for when you're outside prison. Why? Because you're tied there. So however we behave in that moment that we're going through reflects how confident we are that we're on the side. So however you behave during that difficult period is a reflection of how long you think you'll stay in that zone, but also whether you believe you will get out to the other side. Does that make sense?
It does. And funny enough, whilst you're talking like this, you're speaking of a prison, right? That's the analogy you're using. I'm also thinking of a mental prison.
And that, stressful situations can be a mental prison. Like I was telling you, like I was physically not even, like some days not even wanting to get up, just staying in my bed, just watching the Wendy Williams show. That's the only thing that used to make me feel like a little bit happy for 30 minutes every day. But, you start to, the longer you stay in that mental prison, the more you start to convince yourself that this is not, I'm stuck here. And the mind is wired to protect us. So the mind is going to think, right, you know what, let's just stay here, Musonda, it's safe. The last time you went for that job interview, you didn't get it, and then you were rejected. You were sad. So I need to protect you to make sure that you're not crying. I need to protect you to make sure that you're not feeling stressed. So let's just don't do anymore. Just leave it, right? So if we allow the brain and that mental state to stay as it is without keeping moving, we're going to be there stuck longer. So the longer you stay in that position where you don't want to be, the longer you do nothing about it, the longer you don't take any steps, the longer you're intending to be in that space. But sometimes you don't even realize you're doing that though. Like I said, with my situation, I thought I was making some steps, which I was, but I was making some steps, and then I'm making them by spending the whole evening, the whole day, talking about the lack of progress, the fact that I hadn't found a job. So I was undoing my work, physically doing something about it, and then mentally going to undo it, So it's just being aware of how you're showing up for yourself during that time.
I don't know if you realize when you were giving the analogy of being in prison, and if you're there for 8 months, you don't prepare much, but when you know that you're there for 8 years, you've got a lot of preparations that you're doing because you've got 8 years to go. But when you know that you're there for life, you don't even really bother, to be honest. And here I am trying to visualize someone who is in that mental state, that mindset whereby you are now seeing this as, my life is not going anywhere. Like you've already written your story. And in that case, I see that you end up not even trying to do much because you've already imprisoned yourself for life, that nothing good is going to come out of my life. And if you, for example, give yourself a time frame, in the next coming 8 weeks, I'm going to be working on this, and, this is what I want to achieve. Even though I'm not there yet, it's like you are preparing. So that's how I'm visualizing the analogy that you've just shared.
Yeah, and sometimes we're in those spaces subconsciously as well, where you consciously feel like you're doing stuff, but there's other fears in the background that are stopping you, holding you back. Like I gave the example of the job applications. If I been for a few jobs and I've had rejections, my mind starts to think maybe we need to lower our expectation. Maybe we need to stop applying for these jobs that you're qualified for, but maybe, you've been lucky. So sometimes it's the subconscious mind that's actually holding you back. So it's trying to get into yourself and figure out, what is it that is making me stay in this situation longer than I need to stay in it?
Wow. So what can you say someone should be doing in order to be able to come out of that particular mindset? Because you've been imprisoned in that mindset for a while now, and helping yourself out of there is going to take a lot of work. It's going to take someone to really inspire you to come out, and someone to put a mirror right in front of you, and you get to see that this looks like me. I really need to work on my mindset. Because like you said, it happens sometimes in the subconscious, you don't even know. So what are some of the things that people should be looking out for, and what steps should they be taking towards working on that mindset?
So I think it's just being intentional about what you're digesting, what you're taking in, whether it's conversations, whether it's your self-talk, whether it's the books you read, whether it's the podcasts you watch, the films that you watch. Being very intentional about the things that you allow to go inside you, especially when you're going through that moment. So I'll give an example. Recently, I'm planning a relocation to another country. And because I got a bit overwhelmed, I rang one of my sisters and I said, you know what? I think this is too much. I'm not going to move. And she said, why? I was like, I just don't know. I just feel like it's too much. But I had that conversation in my head far too many times, to the extent where I started to see the obstacles before I saw that I am putting those obstacles in there myself. So being very intentional about the thoughts that you entertain, the kind of conversations that you entertain. If I hadn't had a conversation with my sister, because it's two people I had a conversation with. I had a conversation with my mom, and she was like, I think you're right, stay. But I know my mom is waiting from a point
She
wants me around. Yeah, exactly. My sister is like, what do you mean? You've been talking about this for far too long. You better be, stop it right now. That is not you speak. She absolutely snapped me out of it. Now, if I had just kept the conversation with my mom, whose intentions are purely right, by the way, she's the mother
to want you around,
I would have ended up changing my mind about my move. But because I went to speak to the right person, my sister, who is understanding of why I'm making the move, she's supportive of the move. She was able to talk me back into the vision, to bring me back to my why, to remind me of why I started in the first place. So being intentional about the thoughts that you entertain, the talks that you have with yourself, and also the people that you speak to about the situation that you're going through, because some people will keep you in that situation longer to protect you. Maybe they don't want you to come out of it because it means that you might move away. A mother, for example, it means that, you might have to leave the job. You go and tell your boss about, I want to apply for another job in another environment. Of course, he's going to say, are you sure about that? Because he's looking at the pain point that could be on him to start employing someone else and all of that. So unless you have a very supportive other person on the other end, be intentional and mindful about what you share and who you're getting advice from. And sometimes people's advice is coming from trauma. They're projecting the thing they wouldn't do. They wish they had the courage to do it, but they don't have the courage to do it. Or they had done it before and it didn't work out for them. So they will give you advice on the basis of their experience. So just be intentional about what you share and make sure that the thoughts that you're keeping and dwelling on, focusing on, are aligned with the outcome that you want from that situation.
I'm glad that you've raised up that point whereby you have to be intentional with the people that you share or ask for advice. Because for real, people do speak from what they would do if they were in your position.
Correct.
So in short, what you're saying is, if I get it right, is be careful who you share your issues with, as in make sure you're picking the right person. You know, you might, for example, you might have maybe 10 friends, but you know them individually, that you should be able to know that this one is the one I talk to about this one about this, right?
Correct. Yes. 100%. It's like me. I've got 3 older sisters, and there's some things that I wouldn't speak to one of my sisters about because I know she's not going to get it. And there's some things I'll speak to the sister about because she's going to get it, and that sister about. So depending on my situation, I know which of my 3 sisters I need to pick up the phone to for advice on that topic. Because if I pick up and speak to that person, she might derail me because I know them well. So as you said, we have our friends, we have our acquaintances, we have people around us. We need to be able to discern who will relate to this and give me the right advice on this. Not a biased way, by the way, not just choosing the people that are going to affirm your actions, or even if they're not the right actions, people who will give you honest feedback on that topic without tapping into their own traumas, their own projections, people who genuinely can support those conversations without impacting how you feel. And also sometimes people will give you advice, but we have discernment. We can use our own sense and own common sense to decide what we really want to do for ourselves. One of the things that I've recently been talking to my mentees about is what is it that when you hear someone say they're doing triggers your jealousy? What is it? You know, someone might say like, oh, I just got a job here, and your jealousy is triggered. Chances are that is the thing that you need to be doing, but you're not doing yet. So looking out for the things that trigger like how you feel, like, is there anything that's tapping at my heartstrings when someone has said, you know, for example, someone said that they moved. This is the day that I was talking about, maybe I shouldn't move. And I was talking to another friend and they were like, oh, I've relocated to another country. And I was like, oh my God. And I felt it. I was like, okay. So I do need to move because I'm obviously being impacted by this because I want to do it. Because when something doesn't really matter to you, you shouldn't really feel any sense of anything. So yeah, that's a new concept that I'm working out with my team, actually, my mentees, just to show them that if something triggers something, maybe that is the thing that you should be doing.
I like that. Very interesting. I think it's the first time I've heard someone mention something like that. That when you hear something, or if you keep hearing something and that same thing keeps triggering you, it means that it's something that you deeply want inside.
Exactly.
And I love that you've raised that.
Yeah.
And because you want it, and because you want it, what should they do? What's your advice?
Act on it. So take one step at a time, whatever that is. If this thing brings out, if every time you hear someone doing that thing, so for example, if it's writing a book, every time you hear that, oh, I got published, or this person's written a book, you feel some type of way. That is a sign for you to act on that thing that you're feeling, because I think that jealousy has been painted negatively. You know, I used to have one of my childhood friends, her mom used to say the jealousy is two parts. She used to say that, you know, there's a jealousy where you see something and you're bitter that the person has got it and you wish you had it. And then there's one that should inspire you. But I think for me, the biggest piece now makes sense is that feeling would only be there if I wanted something that way. Because if you come and tell me that you bought a pair of flip-flops, if I don't need flip-flops, I won't feel any type of way, right? If you come and tell me, or, you know, even you might tell me you bought this car, if I've never wanted that car, I'd never feel a type of way. But if you come and tell me you bought a car and it's my dream car, and I feel some type of way, it means that I still, and I'm not talking negative way, by the way, you know, where you just feel like, oh, I wish I had that. That tells you that is the thing that you should be working towards. And the way to do that is just one step at a time, 1% every day, 1% every day, 1% every day. By day 100, you've done 100%. It might not be 100% of that thing, but it'll be at least 1% that make 100. So just 1%, a small bit, one step today. If it's a note, a request, whatever it is, just something, an action every single day that moves you towards that thing.
So people need to stop sitting there feeling some kind of way. You need to start taking action, because just getting triggered and doing nothing about it is not going to help anything.
No.
So Musonda, how has your story shaped the work that you're currently doing? The work that you're doing and the life that you're living now, how has this story that you shared with us managed to shape up everything of where you are right now?
So I currently now work in project management, which I said, the program management, where I deliver programs for large organizations. So it was from that job that I ended up getting during that period, where I started into the project management field. And then over time, I started mentoring young people. It was people just reaching out to me saying, hey, can you support me? I'm trying to change careers, or I'm trying to do this. And I started mentoring people. But then I realized that I accelerated quite quickly in the corporate space. So, and when you look at the corporate space, it was not made for people that look like me. However, I managed to work my way up. And what I found quite easy, I realized many Black women were not finding it as easy. So, you know, I started out with project coordination and then became a project manager and then a senior project manager and then a program manager and working at program director level. I realized that I was able to navigate the system that many people struggle to navigate with ease, because I knew how to play the game. I didn't have to change myself. I didn't have to switch. I just showed up as I am, but I knew how to play the game, and not play the game as in pretend to be someone else. Understood how the corporate space worked. And because I understood how the corporate space worked, I was able to coach and mentor other Black women to get promoted, to show up. You know, because we have a lot of coaches that support with people to create their own business, to create your own this, but there's not many coaches that support women thrive within their careers, because some women don't want to go and set up their own business. Some women don't want to go and they just want to enjoy their job, get paid what they deserve, get promoted when they deserve to be promoted, and not have to deal with microaggressions, not have to be undermined and undervalued. So that is where I started a community of Black women, supporting them in the corporate space and ensuring that I give them the tools to navigate the scripts and things to use. For example, if you go into work and someone touches your hair, instead of how do you respond to that? And it also stemmed from another experience that I have had in work. I am quite forward. I am exactly how I am on this score is exactly how I come across in work. And somehow it was seen as aggressive and labeled as aggressive. And I was like, this is insane. You know, I'm just existing. This is just me being me, and you're labeling me as aggressive. So most people then shy away, but I decided to leave that job and just go and do my own thing and set my own consultancy and do my own work. And I still work in corporates and support organizations in their implementation, but from my own consultancy without having to be employed by someone else. And because I'd had to do that, but I had to navigate the levels, you know, speaking to senior people and understanding the things that the conversations that happen at levels that we don't get involved in, I was able to help other women come into the space. This is how you show up. This is how you can keep being yourself without having to feel like you have to change yourself. This is how you deal with the microaggressions. This is how you deal with being undermined. And that's the kind of coaching and support that I give women in corporate spaces.
Well done. I love that. And I love that you found a gap in the system and you managed to create this space whereby you're helping other Black women grow with their careers. I love that. Well done for that. So lastly, for anyone listening that has been impacted by your story, how can they connect with you, or how can they benefit from the work that you're currently doing?
Yeah, so depends on where they are in life. If it's women in corporate spaces, like I say, I have a school community where people can just go and access my modules for free. And then I do one-to-one coaching as well, that's paid for. But I also have a corporate client playbook, which is a digital product where people can understand and learn and scripts and of how to navigate the corporate spaces. I also have another community, which is a community for people in project management. If you reach out to me, I can send you the link for you to join. And this is where I mentor people who are either looking to come into project management or are already in project management, but then need to get next level. They're struggling to go from being maybe a junior project manager, for example, to a senior project manager. My name is Musonda on LinkedIn. It's the same. Instagram, it's Musrox, MUSROX. And that's the same on all the other platforms. Musrox is the same on Facebook, the same on TikTok, the same on Threads. And yeah, that's how people can find me. Just reach out. I'm always happy to connect with people and have conversations with them and see how I can help them.
Thank you so much, Musonda. Thank you for taking the time to join today's conversation. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers are going to benefit from this conversation that we've had. It's really inspiring. And all the mindset work that you had to do is going to really inspire a lot of people. So for those who've enjoyed this conversation, I'm going to leave Musonda's details in the comment section. So be sure to check the comment section so you know where to find her. Musonda, thank you so much once again for sharing your story with so much honesty, and you were open. And you gave us all those nuggets that I'm sure a lot of people are going to find really helpful. And your journey is such a reminder that growth doesn't come from waiting until you feel ready, but it comes from taking action, which a lot of people find themselves not doing. But your story has really inspired and reminded us that we need to take action. It's one thing to have faith, but it's another thing to put in the action. So for everyone else that is listening, let this be a reminder that you don't need to become someone else in order to be able to move forward. You just need the courage and you need the willingness to show up just as you are on purpose. So if you've enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to like this video, share with a friend who needs to hear this, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you in the next conversation. For now, we are checking out, and do take care.
Thank you.